So welcome to our webinar. Appreciate everyone taking the time. I know it's a busy time in IT at the minute, and we're really excited about our session today with Armis. So what we're going to cover off today, I'm going to give a brief overview of Cloud Solutions Group and why we're here today. I'm Josh Rubens. I'm the CEO and founder of Cloud Solutions Group. We've got Richard Muniz, who's the Regional Sales Director for Armis, who's on today. If you can see him, he's raised his hand. Richard's in Brisbane, so we won't be too jealous of you, Richard. I think you were saying it's 27 degrees and you're able to go to the beach and get a beer and do all sorts of things we're not able to do. So, but we won't hold it against him. He'll go over, give us an overview of the Armis solution, a couple of case studies, and we want to sort of try and focus on the verticals and the types of customers that have joined us today, and we'll go through any Q&A that people have. But I'll try and be brief because we're really interested today in hearing what Armis has got to say. So what we're seeing in the market, so a lot of this will be very familiar to everyone on its IT organisation, and companies are generally trying to do more with less in relation to IT, so budgets aren't aren't increasing unless you're in fast-moving consumer goods like Coles and Woolworths. Everyone's trying to do more with less. There's an increased support load of people working remotely, mobile, first-line workers, and there's a lot more help desk calls because some customers who might have 300 people working from home, so it's like they've got 300 sites. There's a lot of manual-based paper processes that may have been tolerable in the office, but now in a sort of hybrid working environment, that's really become unworkable and expensive. The IT systems aren't meeting the needs, and as I said, budget is generally not available, so people are trying to move to the cloud. Hybrid is where everyone's going. Over 70% of organisations are moving to the cloud, and multi-cloud's on the rise, with people wanting to put things in Azure, things in Salesforce, or maybe certain workloads might go to AWS or GCP, etc. And that's sort of really brings its own challenges. And then, importantly and more relevant for today, is there's new rising cybersecurity threats due to this environment. And the other thing is, as Satya Nadella said, that trying to deliver 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months. So it's been 6 months now. I don't know if that means it's been 6 years of digital transformation, but certainly a lot of organisations have done a lot of cloud adoption, a lot of digitising of processes. So it's been really great to see how the IT industry has really shone and made this work for everyone. So what does this mean for security? It means that the perimeter has disappeared. So the old, we're in the office and we've got a data center. So it's now multi-cloud, as we said, software as a service, offices, homes, data centers. So, the situation of where I've got a firewall and I've got some endpoint security and I'm feeling pretty safe, well, that's now gone. That perimeter is no longer there. There's been a big rise in cybercrime and bad actors, as it's called, and these numbers, so it's 92% of Australian organisations suffered one or more business impacting cyber attacks in the past 12 months. So that's a Forrester, that's not coming from me, that's a Forrester report that came out only a couple of months ago. That's a really high number. So it's 92%. So it's not just, somewhere else and someone else's problem, that's, our problem. And the organisations on this call, I'm sure, can attest to that. 39% had loss of customer data, 39% had financial loss or theft, and there's now, the new compliance requirements that came out where directors and board members can be personally liable for loss of data. So, people are taking this very seriously. So as a business, Cloud Solutions Group, we're focusing on 3 key areas. It's cybersecurity, it's identity. Everyone's talking about identity being the new threat plane. A lot of people have done multi-factor authentication or layering on top conditional access, and working with Azure AD for that. Data loss prevention. So how are you going to protect your data now in people's homes, in clouds, in data centers, wherever it may be? It's becoming a bigger issue. And then now the rise of unmanaged devices and IoT, which is really what Richard's going to talk about today. There's an exponential increase in these devices, and there hasn't really been good solutions in the market to help address this. So this is really, that's what Richard's going to cover off. So very quickly, I'm not going to go into this. It's a big slide. There's a lot on it. So a lot of you will know Cloud Solutions Group. We started in 2010. We're acquired by Deloitte Consulting in 2015, and we re-established the brand early this year. And really the opportunity that COVID has presented us is to really focus on areas where we can help customers as a result of this, which, as we said, is really with cloud engineering, people wanting to move to hybrid and multi-cloud. With our experience, we were the first independent cloud consultancy in Australia in 2010 with our data center hybrid offering, as well as across all the clouds, networking and security, which is the topic for today. Our Microsoft, the modern workplace practice that we have, we've got fantastic experience there. And then with Power Apps, Power BI, the whole low-code, no-code movement. And some of you may have seen, we've pre-built some things like expense management and return to office COVID management apps as well, and done some really cool things in that space. So it's really those areas around cost management, move to the cloud, securing the distributed workforce, and automating and digitizing legacy processes for the new world. So that's really what we're about and what we're here for. So that's really all I have. So we'll get to the more exciting part, and I'll hand over to Richard to talk about Armis. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. I'll just quickly share my desktop here. Okay, just want to confirm you can see my screen okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Muniz. I'm the Regional Director for Armis. I'm based out here in Brisbane. As Josh said, it's a bit toasty today, and I considered not wearing a jacket to this, but since Josh looks so great, I thought I'd put one on. Thanks a lot for jumping on. I know your time's precious. I really wanted to take the time today to talk around, introduce you to Armis and talk around a little bit around how we're making digital transformation safe for enterprises. I think Josh touched on it earlier. There's a lot happening in this space at the moment. The topic of today specifically around zero trust and how unmanaged and IoT is making zero trust a little bit more difficult for a lot of organizations. So it's definitely a topic that a lot of people are talking about at the moment, and really like to thank Josh and MTech for partnering and helping us have a little discussion today. So I guess just a high level, Armis, if for those of you who haven't heard of Armis before, we've been in Australia for just about a year and a half now. I guess if we reflect back over the last 12 months in Australia, we've seen a huge growth curve in our business here, specifically, I guess, proving that the unmanaged and IoT space has a big impact and a big perception of risk for a lot of organizations. An interesting fact about Armis, about 3 or 4 months ago, we were acquired by Insight Partners and Capital G, which is the investment arm of Alphabet and Google, for just over $1 billion. It's quite a big sum of cash for a company that's just going on 5 years old, and I think really validates the market, the technology, and the problem area that's actually growing exponentially. The interesting point here on this slide as well, you'll note there's a 280 million devices tracked, and this is really important when I talk around Armis's technology and how it works and how we're able to identify a lot of these unmanaged devices on people's networks. It's through our cloud crowdsourced knowledge base. I think we're approaching over 300 million devices. I'll go into a little bit more detail about how that works and why it's important down later in the slide. I guess when we're talking around the problem of unmanaged devices on people's networks, now when we classify an unmanaged device, it's really a device that you can't put an agent on. So if you look at a classical example of a managed device, your computers, your laptops, your servers, I'd say most of the people here today would have some type of endpoint protection or EDR solution that is installed on those machines and is looking for any anomalous activities or any type of malicious activity that those devices, that may be occurring on those devices. What we're seeing in the industry now is an explosion of devices that you can't actually install any software on. And this is creating a lot of headaches for a lot of organizations because you can't actually protect what you can't see. And you would have heard that a lot. But if we have a look at some examples of these devices that, you know, Josh touched on earlier, a lot of companies are migrating towards the cloud now. So the perimeter that you have to defend is now, if we take an OT, you know, manufacturing plant, for example, it's all the way down on the shop floor and all the way through their network into a cloud. So we're seeing a huge amount of increase in risk and breaches across these unmanaged devices because a lot of organizations don't have the technology to understand what these devices are, the risk they're posing on the network, and more importantly, what to do with these types of devices. So if we look, for example, at VoIP phones, mid last year, Microsoft was breached through their VoIP phone infrastructure. It was highly publicized breach across the world. We saw Huawei in the US, they were exposed through malware that was installed on their point of sale systems. They lost 30 million credit card details earlier on in the year. We've seen a number of breaches and ransomware attacks across medical devices and specifically targeting medical industry over the last few years. Manufacturing equipment in Australia alone, I can count at least 10 that have had some type of production loss over the last 12 to 24 months due to ransomware or some other type of cyber attack on the organization. Obviously, that increases exponentially as we start looking at manufacturing globally. We work with a company called Mondelez who lost around $150 million worth of production loss because of the Petya ransomware that targeted their manufacturing facilities. We're seeing CCTV security cameras being used to launch botnet attacks. And obviously, if you're familiar with the cameras, they typically don't have very good security, are on your network, and have default credentials that can be exploited very quickly and easily to launch denial of service attacks on infrastructure. We've seen attacks, ransomware on smart televisions in boardrooms, on HVAC systems, so heating, ventilation, air conditioning, cooling, building systems, access control. So all these devices are examples of devices that are on your network, aren't visible by your traditional security controls, and are posing a significant risk to a lot of businesses. Now, we couple that with some companies allowing BYOD devices, smartphone, tablets, watches that are connecting to your corporate network, and the problem becomes even more well-defined. So if we look back at, what are some of the traditional security programs and how they've been affected or impacted by this explosion of unmanaged devices on people's networks. So if we take, for example, asset inventory, most of you will have some type of network scanning tool. You'll have some endpoint protection software that gives you some visibility over what devices are on your network. But I've seen it time and time again where 40%, 50% of devices are absolutely invisible with the traditional security tools that people have on their network. And there's examples of those devices that we covered off before. But it's really important because if you don't have a complete asset inventory, if you don't have context of what these devices are, it actually has a massive impact on the other traditional security programs that you might be wanting to put in place. So for example, network segmentation. If you don't understand the context of the device, it's really hard to actually separate it effectively or create policies to manage that device or the risk of that device. If we look at vulnerability management, again, most of the vulnerability management tools out there in the market were designed to scan computers, laptops, desktops, when we start putting in things like access control systems, Nest thermostat systems, I've seen drones on people's networks and all sorts of interesting gaming consoles. These systems can't scan for vulnerabilities in those areas. And when you start looking at upwards of 20 or 30% of your network plus that have these devices that you can't scan for vulnerabilities, it starts becoming a big problem. And then we look at incident response. So if something has occurred on the network, or you're proactively trying to harden your network, not having the ability to see or contextualize what these devices are creates a lot of headaches for a lot of organizations. So what have we seen out there in the market? And I'll talk through some use cases locally that we've been experiencing in our region, specifically in Australia and New Zealand. But if we look across globally, a good example, we did a project for a customer that had a compromised tablet in their boardroom that was streaming video footage to an unknown location. So these types of scenarios you really wouldn't consider. These are innocent devices that are in your boardroom that could be used to compromise your organization. We've seen a number of ransomware attacks launched on smart televisions, and then using that as a mechanism to laterally move throughout the network. We've seen a number of attacks, high-profile attacks in the US, where CCTV cameras have been used to launch DDoS attacks on public infrastructure. We've seen a huge amount of ransomware attacks and also targeted attacks on OT or manufacturing plants, critical infrastructure, power, water, oil and gas. In this particular case, we saw a HMI that was infected by ransomware. And believe it or not, I've done a number of these projects over the last 3 or 4 years, and you'd be surprised at how much ransomware and malware we actually find in these critical networks that are hidden and unknown. For those of you that have a number of offices and a number of printers, the amount of printers that we've seen with the default hotspot enabled, again, a mechanism for someone to connect and circumvent your access control on your network. And then scarily, one of the really interesting scenarios that we found in a hospital in the US was a compromised infusion pump that was infected by malware and was connected to a patient in real time. So that raises, obviously a number of safety concerns there. So the point here is these attacks are occurring. The interesting thing here is a lot of these devices that you see have outdated operating systems. They're unpatched. They're on your network. They've got insecure by design. They're an easy target for a lot of attackers and a lot of ransomware. And one of the interesting saying is you don't have to be the target to be the victim. And we hear that a lot. And you're only as good as your weakest link. And these are, unfortunately, the weakest link for a lot of organizations. So defining the problem is one point, but what does Armis do to help solve that problem? So the first piece is Armis is a passive, real-time and continuous solution. So if you can take anything away from today, it's the fact that Armis does not scan your network. It doesn't interact with any of your devices that on your network. It just listens to network traffic and is passive. So that's really important, specifically around some of the critical networks we work in. But more importantly, we're not adding traffic to your network. We're not adding any element of risk to your network. And what we're able to do is discover, by listening to network traffic and other mechanisms, and I'll speak to that shortly, we're able to discover every single asset that's on your network, both managed, unmanaged, and IoT devices, everything that's on your wired network, as well as everything that's on your wireless network. Now, if you can think about that for a second, we're going to pick up computers, laptops, servers, but we're also going to pick up drones. We're going to pick up, just recently we did a project where we had, Sonos smart speakers on people's networks, Google Assistants, smart watches, HVAC systems. Armis gives you the ability to visualize every single asset that's on your network. Now that's really important because that drives your other security programs and controls. So once we've identified every single asset that's on your network, we're able to also identify the risks and vulnerabilities of every single one of those assets. So because Armis is sitting there and listening to traffic, we're able to categorize what the device is, the device type, its make, its model, its firmware versions. And from there, we're able to compare it to an extensive CVE or vulnerability database that we have in our cloud environment. And we're able to give a risk score for the device based on its vulnerabilities, based on its manufacturer reputation, based on its network traffic patterns and what it's doing on your network. Now, once we've identified all the devices, we've identified and ranked risks and vulnerabilities for every single one of your devices. The third piece is, okay, what do I do with that information now? So the really nice thing about Armis is because we're a crowdsourced knowledge base in the cloud, we're basically pulling asset information, extracting metadata, sending that to our threat feed in our cloud, and we're able to run really, really sophisticated behavioral models and anomaly detection over what we're seeing on your network, and then alert to you in real time if we're seeing any abnormality. So a good example might be, we had this example with a customer where a CCTV camera was introduced onto their network on one of their sites. They had various sites. That CCTV camera was a Chinese Hikvision camera. It had a known vulnerability that allowed remote access into that camera. The IT group had no idea that these devices had been installed on their network, but it did open up a backdoor into their network. So that's a good example of how Armis can actually monitor and detect situations like that. So once we do understand the risk, the vulnerability, the gaps in your network, we're then able to integrate with your existing security controls and your existing security tools, which is really important. So for instance, we can integrate with your SIEM, your ticketing system, any type of NAC solution you might have, your CMDB such as ServiceNow. Armis has over 150 different integrations that will basically allow you to do some type of automation and policy enforcement based on the device types, the device risks, the device vulnerabilities that we're seeing across your network. So that's, I guess, in a high level, a summary of what Armis is doing. Now, let's apply that back to, I guess, the problems we saw earlier. With the explosion of these unmanaged devices, we saw a number of impact on asset inventory, network segmentation, vulnerability management, and detection and response. So now, with a complete asset inventory, with a lot of context on what the devices are doing, what their risks are, what their vulnerabilities are, building that asset inventory out has now helped us to solve a lot of the problems that we had before with these devices on our network. So for instance, now with context, I'm allowed to drive different policies based on these unknown, what were unknown devices on my networks before, and really allows me to harden my network, segment my network, and drive zero trust methodologies. Looking at vulnerability management now, Armis solves that problem because we have a huge vulnerability management database for these devices. We have pre-learnt hundreds and thousands of different types of unmanaged devices in our cloud. And if you can imagine, we have thousands of customers feeding all that information into our knowledge base in our cloud with over 300 million devices. So we have a huge vulnerability management database, and we're able to extend the visibility of vulnerabilities across to unmanaged devices on your network. And then obviously feeding into detection and response. Now that you've got the context, you understand risk, you understand vulnerabilities, you understand real world traffic patterns that are occurring with these devices on your network, it gives your security teams a much better capability to do detection and response. So looking at architecture, and this is the one thing that, coming from a technology background, I really enjoy and like about Armis. It's the fact that it's so easy to deploy. So the way that looks in a customer site is we have a virtual machine. It can be either a physical hardware appliance or a virtual appliance, depending on what your requirements are. Now that sits on-prem, so that'll be on your network somewhere. And there's a number of different ways to ingest what we call network telemetry or asset information out of your network. One of the traditional mechanisms is through a span or a tap on a switch. So what we're doing there is ingesting raw network traffic, analyzing the protocols that we're seeing across that, and then we're able to decipher what the devices are, what their firmware versions are, what their make and model numbers are of all the devices that you've got on your network, which is really important. The second key piece of integration is with your wireless infrastructure. So if you've got Cisco WLCs or Aruba, we're able to integrate with the wireless LAN controllers and then pull information of devices that are communicating or connected to every single access point across your organization. So again, bringing all that wireless information is really important. And then I guess the other key piece of integration is through your existing security tools. So we have integrations with Carbon Black. We have integrations with your CrowdStrike, your EDR solutions. We have integration with SCCM. We have integration with firewalls, with NACs. So we're able to extract a whole bunch of information from existing technology investments that you have to further build and contextualize the database of assets that you've got on your network. So once we understand that, we're obviously feeding metadata into our cloud and then comparing the behaviors and what we're seeing across your network with our knowledge base in the cloud and our threat detection engine. So the deployment is really simple, it's really quick, it's really easy to do, and you get a lot of value and a lot of visibility straight away from our integrations. Now, we spoke a little bit around the cloud integrations as well. So we've got native integration now with GCP, Azure, and AWS, which allows us to pull workload information from your cloud. And again, the perimeter is extended to the cloud now. So we've got the ability to visualize the assets that you've got in your cloud as well. One thing that's been very popular here in Australia in particular is our integration with Cisco Meraki. So what we've done here is created a cloud-to-cloud API integration with Meraki that doesn't require any Armis appliances on site or on-prem. So what that means is with a 10-minute integration, we're able to pull all the asset information out of Meraki, but more importantly, we're actually also pulling raw packet capture data from all the different access points across your Meraki infrastructure and then bringing that into Armis, again, to do the threat intelligence and asset identification, vulnerability and risk information as well. So this has been an extremely successful integration we've had. So if anyone here has a Meraki instance, happy to chat to you about what we're doing in here. Very quick, very easy to do, huge amount of value on asset discovery and what's on your network. So if we take some local use cases, and I kind of tried to tailor this to the audience and the people that were going to be on the call. So if there's any other use cases you're interested in, please let me know and I can share some examples. One of our first customers in Australia was in the construction industry, and it was really interesting because I hadn't done a lot of work in construction before, so it was really eye-opening for me to see exactly what some of the issues were in that space. So we deployed the Armis solution in this particular customer. There was around 4 or 5 different sites. They had a Meraki infrastructure and also had some data centers that we deployed to as well. Within about 3 or 4 days, we detected a compromised device that was communicating to a ransomware domain. We identified a number of the machines on their network that weren't running the endpoint software that they thought should be running. We identified a number of different old operating systems and applications that were outdated. We found a number of different unencrypted credentials being transmitted across the network. The really neat use case is we also found a bunch of IoT devices in the vicinity of their access points. So basically the way your wireless access points technology work is they're able to detect different types of wireless signals and Bluetooth beaconing that are in the same airspace of those access points. So in this particular case, we're able to show the customer all the different types of Bluetooth IoT tracking devices they had on the site, but weren't necessarily connected to the network, which was a really interesting use case that we found. Moving across into education, understanding the connected assets that are on the network, both on the wide network and on the wireless network and wide network in real time. Again, we found a bunch of old operating systems and old applications that were on the network. We detected a number of remote access connections into the network as well, and we're able to tell you or tell our customer what those remote access connections were doing on the network. Who were they connecting to? What were they doing? Were they copying files? Were they talking to a high risk asset? Questions they couldn't answer before. Another really interesting use case is in the retail sector, where we work with a customer that's got around 400 different retail sites scattered around Australia. And initially, I think within the first 24 hours, we detected a compromised device that was communicating out to a Chinese domain, which was unusual activity and behavior for them. And it's something we alerted the security team to. Updating their ServiceNow CMDB database. So their big issue was they had this CMDB, they've invested a lot of money in it, but it wasn't up to date. And one of the first questions we asked was, can you tell us if your CMDB is correct, has all the right asset information? And they weren't very confident in that, and we proved that with real-time view of the assets they had on the network. The other interesting use case there was looking at network performance analysis. So because we were tapped into their network and understanding real-time traffic patterns, we're able to tell them things like latency, packet loss, and a bunch of network KPIs from their site back to their data center where they hosted their critical SQL database. Moving into the logistics space, this was really interesting. We obviously looked at their entire enterprise network and found a lot of OT, PLCs and SCADA systems, real operational technology equipment on their corporate network, which they weren't expecting. So we found around, in this particular customer, 20% of the devices that were on their network were unmanaged. So while they had really good security controls for the other 80%, there was still a massive gap there. There's 20% of devices that were on their network. And this isn't uncommon. Most organizations I work with, usually around 20 to 40% of the devices that are on the network are unmanaged. And what we're seeing is that obviously exponentially increase over time. I spoke before about an example with a CCTV having a back door. A similar situation here, where it's a Chinese Hikvision camera, make, model, on their network. They weren't aware of it, posing a significant risk to their business. And the other, I guess, use case, which is topical right now, obviously during COVID, is working from home. So obviously, a lot of your employees will be working from home. They'll have access to Office 365. They'll have access to Box or Google Drive, which are external links up to a cloud SaaS platform. It's not something Armis is monitoring, but what we are monitoring is any type of connection from the home back into your corporate network. So anything that comes in as a VPN into your network, we're able to monitor those connections, but more importantly, monitor what those connections are doing on the network. So if someone VPNs onto your network and starts copying files, starts RDPing, SSHing, port scanning, doing any type of behavior on your network, we'll obviously log that behavior and then leave it there for analysis and forensic investigation later if required. So looking at what we do, so we spoke around the data sources. So obviously we're connecting to raw network traffic, we're connecting to your wireless LAN controllers, your wireless traffic, we're connecting to your switches, we're connecting to a number of different existing applications that you have across your network. So that's the data source. That allows us to extract information. And when we look at the types of information we're extracting, we have over 1,500 different attributes that we extract for every single asset that you have on your network. So things like physical behavior, MAC, make, model, firmware version, the reputation, of the manufacturer of that device, what its network characteristics are, what is it doing, what its behavior is on the network, how many IP connections does this device have, how much traffic is it sending out, when is it sending the traffic, what protocols is it using, how much, etc., etc. So we use all that information to then feed our knowledge base and then categorize a device behavior, basically. So you can imagine in our cloud now, and we take the CCTV example again, we'll have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of different types of CCTV cameras in our cloud. Now, for one particular make, model, firmware version, we might have 50,000 of these types of devices. And what we're able to do there is they compare all the same devices that you've got on network with a crowdsourced knowledge base of the exact same type, make, and model that's in our cloud. And that's really what drives the intelligence for your organization. It gives us the ability to easily categorize the device quickly and also allow you to extract any anomalous behavior from that device very quickly as well. So I guess something that's been really popular with us, and then I'll pause here and open it up to some questions. We've been doing a lot of risk assessment, asset inventory and risk assessment. So what that involves is either us connecting via API to your Meraki infrastructure, or us using one of our hardware collectors or a virtual collector in your virtual environment to gather that network telemetry that I discussed and spoke about. We set up a single tenant for you in our cloud. It's not multi-tenanted. Your data is safe. It's secure. It's not shared with anyone else. It allows us to give you a complete picture of what are these devices on your network? How many managed devices do I have on my network? How many unmanaged devices do I have on my network? Is this even a threat or a risk for my business? So we can answer that question for you through this exercise. Then we give you a lot of really interesting information on your top 10 risks, your top 10 vulnerabilities, the top 10 devices we've seen on your network, what operating systems you've got, what applications you've got, how old are they, did they raise any risk flags as well. And we give you all that as part of as a report, and we work with obviously our partners CSG to help drive that forward. It's very quick, it's very easy, usually between 2 weeks to 4 weeks, and you've got a really nice outcome for your business. So I'll probably just pause it there and open it up to any questions.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, please unmute yourself and and shout out. You're among friends, so feel free. Or in the chat.
I just had a question. So no automatic remediation actually occurs. You have to review the report and then apply your own actions. Is that correct?
So we do have automated actions through our integration. So you can imagine, we've got integrations with firewalls. We've got integration directly onto the switch, so we can update access control lists on your switch, for instance. We can update policies on your firewall. So if you've got Checkpoint, Cisco, Palo Alto, we've got integration with NAC as well. So Cisco ICE, for instance. So we do automate and we can block or boot off devices from the network, depending on what you set as a policy within our system. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Actually, one of the other interesting, sorry, just to add to that, one of the other interesting things we can do, because we're sitting there and listening to raw network traffic and identifying devices in real time, we can actually initiate real-time vulnerability scans. So we've got integration with Tenable, Rapid7, Qualys. So we can actually, if we identify a device that's connected to your network in real time, we can actually automate a vulnerability scan of that device as well through our integrations with those platforms.
So Richard, a question's come through about whether we integrate with Aruba access points and switches.
Yes, we do.
Do you want to? Can you elaborate at all on that?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I guess it's pretty simple and straightforward, our integration with the access points. I believe Aruba is just through an SSH, a read-only SSH connection. that allows us to pull and extract the information we need out of that device. So I believe we've got an API integration as well, similar to our Meraki system that allows us to pull device information. If you want some more technical information, I'm happy to dig some up and send them over to you.
Okay, yeah, there's a few questions coming through on the chat. So if you want to, anyone who wants to keep sending them out, that'll be good. Can you protect the questions come through as can you protect POS machines, organisations in retail? Do you want to maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Look, yeah, absolutely. So, you know, some of our biggest customers in the US are in the retail space. I think Mattress Firm is one, Taco Bell is another. We've got Taco Bell globally. So we do a lot in that space. Point of sale systems, we've got a huge database of point of sale systems in our cloud. So number one, it allows us to identify what type of point of sale system it is, the risks and vulnerabilities based on the software version that's installed on those POS systems. And then more importantly, if we do detect any malicious behavior, any ransomware, so again, because we're on the wire, we're listening to network traffic, if we see ransomware try to propagate through the network, through those devices, we'll detect that and we can block or quarantine based on our integration through the switch or through the firewall. So to answer your question, yeah, absolutely we can.
Right. All right. Anyone else got any other questions? All right. So while we're doing that, so Richard, just in summary, so the action on people is to reach out, and we're offering that report for free, basically. So do you want to quickly explain what the process there? So if they can, so I suppose initially reach out to myself or Andy Khan, whoever, or Rocco, whoever looks after you at Cloud Solutions Group, send me an email or any one of us. And yeah, Richard, do you want to just talk through that process there quickly for people?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I think, you know, I touched on it earlier. It's a very simple and easy process to go through. We would typically we would sign some type of NDA if you don't have one with CSG already. We would then discuss a little bit about your network architecture, where your sites are, where's your data center, what does your network look like, and that allows our architects to determine where the optimal place is to either put a virtual collector to send you a hardware collector. Usually it takes about 1 to 2 weeks to send a hardware collector, or what type of systems you currently have in place for us to integrate with through our API. So that's usually a 1 hour meeting, very quick and easy to do. From there, we spin up a tenant in AWS. So it'll be your businessname.armis.com. That is your private tenant. And then from there, we generate a collector that can only communicate to your tenant. And that's how we generate the collectors for your site. You place that on your site. We run the integrations. It's very quick and easy to do through the interface. After about 1 to 2 weeks, we've got more than enough data to spit out a report that will show you risks, vulnerabilities, unmanaged, managed. It's yeah, pretty quick and easy process to do.
So there's some great value from that, even from just getting that report. And then obviously, if they're seeing the value, then they can look at whether it's a proof of concept or discuss options and costs. So how is it costed, by the way, while we're getting down to that? How does it work?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we're a bit different to some of the other technologies that you would see there. So we're priced based on organization size, which is a little different. So we price our technology based on the number of full-time employees that are in your organization, not the number of devices, not the number of networks, not the number of sites, which can sometimes be a little difficult to know up front, given the transient environment your IT network has. So we're based on organization size. So we've got a fixed price. It's a yearly subscription cost, typical minimum of 1 year up to 3 years, and yeah, pretty straightforward, very easy to do.
Right. How do you sort of see yourself in the market? Who's your key competitors? Or if you want to, quickly cover that off, people may be thinking it, but not wanting to ask.
No, absolutely. So look, I guess in the IT world, it's interesting because everyone's competing for budget at the moment, right? So you've got a number of different security initiatives. You've got a bunch of technology out there, be it vulnerability scanning, being EDR, being NDR, being endpoint, being there's firewalls. So we're all competing for budget. I would say the traditional competitors we tend to get compared with companies like Darktrace, for instance, simply because we're capturing raw network traffic and we're doing similar things to their NDR. So we get compared to Darktrace quite often. Others like Forescout, for instance, are a competitor of ours that are working in the IoT space as well. In the medical space, we get compared to Zingbox, Medigate, a CyberMDX, very targeted, specific to the medical industry. And then if we look at the OT world, companies like Nozomi, Clarity, CyberX, specifically in that industrial control area of the network are seen as competitors. I guess the big differentiator for us is we work in that OT space, we work in the medical space, we work in finance, we work in banking, we work in retail. We're an enterprise-wide solution. We're not just looking at a specific area of the network. So that's one of the big, I guess, differentiators for us.
Right. So Forescout is what are they? They're just doing IoT, or what's the specific? Because I think most people would know of them and maybe would see that. It'd be good if you could just quickly cover that off.
Yeah, look, we've competed against Forescout a number of times. I think the big differentiator for us is the way our technology works. We've got a crowdsourced cloud knowledge base. So our ability to identify multiple devices is second to none in the industry. So I think that's the first key takeaway. The second key takeaway is we're agentless. We don't need to install any software on devices.
So they do? Is that what you're saying?
They do. Correct. Yes. Right. So it's I think if anyone's and I don't like to talk ill of any technologies. I think there's
people like to know the differences though.
Absolutely. So yeah, look, being agentless for us, it's a much easier solution to deploy, to maintain, and gives you a significant amount of value very quickly.
Great, thank you. Sorry for those who were without notice, Richard, that you maintained your poise really well. So if there's no other questions, thanks everyone for attending. We really appreciate your time. As I said, reach out. It looks like there's some really great value in that free assessment to at least give you some visibility into your environment as to what the scope of the problem is. So I don't think there's anything to lose there. And yeah, we appreciate your time and thank you very much.